Welcome to the Manifestation and Money podcast, Michelle.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, I would love for you to introduce yourself and let the listeners know about you and your story.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Michelle Hawk. I live in the Pacific Northwest, just outside of Portland, Oregon. And I have been studying and practicing shamanism since 2003 at age 15 and working with alchemy, working with energy healing. And I started my business in 2009. So I have been self-employed for quite a while now in various iterations of my practice and been through a lot of transformation as an entrepreneur, but that has really reflected the transformations that I have gone through personally and spiritually as a result of my spiritual practice as well. Now I mentor and train spiritual practitioners in shamanism, alchemy, and energy healing and mediumship. And I also support non-practitioners who are looking for those tools for their own awakening, healing, and transformation.
So fun, so cool. I love having guests on the show that are embodying creating work and a paycheck around those things that they love to do. Because you talk to so many people that are struggling out there into the 9 to 5 grind, and typically they're struggling because it doesn't feel in alignment or congruent to their purpose and what they should actually be doing in their life. So having people like you on the show is just to kind of shed the light on what different types of lifestyles can look like and how you can make money doing these kind of things with your gifts. So I would love you to share with the audience 2 words that popped up in there that for me, I'm like, what do these mean? So that was alchemy and shamanism.
Yeah, so shamanism is an umbrella term, and particularly in the US, the word shaman and shamanism has a lot of charge around it because of issues with cultural appropriation and people not really understanding where that comes from. But shamanism is an umbrella term used to describe earth-based spiritual practice that is ubiquitous to Indigenous people all over the world. I live in the US. So Indigenous peoples in North America, we have a really horrible history of oppression and genocide, et cetera, and extraction from these groups of people. And we see this all over the world, unfortunately. But shamanism, it's not just people in North America. It's, again, people all over the world. There's lineages of European shamanism, African shamanism, Mongolian shamanism, Siberian shamanism, all over Australian shamanism from Indigenous people. And it is this connection with the earth. It's an animistic consciousness, and animistic means attuning to that life force that is universal and connects all things. So animism looks at all things are alive, animals, plants, rocks, the earth, the elements, and all things are united through this universal aliveness consciousness. And shamanism is, of course, there are specifics and unique practices that are very specific to each different lineage. And yet there are some unifying factors, this animistic consciousness, this connection with the spirit realm. As I have studied and practiced shamanism since 2003, my primary lineage that I have been initiated into comes from what is now Hungary. And I have also studied and practiced Celtic shamanism, as well as studied with Indigenous teachers from both North and South America. And so I'm a multi-lineage practitioner, as so many of us in this modern Western world are multi-lineage, not only by blood, but also by our practices and trainings. And alchemy, the other buzzword that you asked me about, and I say buzzword because it's very vogue right now, talking about alchemy. Everyone's using the word alchemy and nobody really seems to know what it means.
Mm-hmm.
So alchemy in pop culture consciousness, we see as representing the transformation from lead into gold. And that's really just one tiny part of the whole alchemy pie. Alchemy is the process of transformation and transmuting base material on all levels in our bodies, our hearts, our minds, our spirits, our businesses, our homes, and transmuting that into its most elevated, actualized, radiant, enlightened form, no matter what that may be. And so alchemy is the roadmap to that transformation. It is the process of what it means to go through the journey of death, purification, and rebirth to take something from this base state and bring it through the process into its most elevated self-actualized version.
Wow. Just listening to that, your journey talking about how you've learned, I think so many entrepreneurs can relate to that in an entrepreneurial journey, right?
Yeah.
You go to school, you get a job, and typically that's what you're doing. We're in entrepreneurship, and it sounds like your journey, it's a continual path of evolution. You're learning something, which is opening the door to something else, which is opening the door to something else. There's always something to be learned. So, you working with people, what kind of work are you doing with people when you're teaching them and training them?
About half of my clients are not practitioners. So they're people who are wanting these tools of shamanism, alchemy, energy healing, and everything that I do, wanting that for their personal journey, whether they're working through developmental childhood trauma, they're working through ancestral lineage trauma, they're working healing in their body, working with developing their consciousness, their spiritual awareness, their spiritual connection, all of the above, or they're looking at their lives and saying, you know what, I don't feel connected to my purpose. I'm not happy. I feel like something's missing, and I want to go deep under all the layers of conditioning and come home to myself. I don't even know who I am right now. So I have people come to me who are in that journey. And then I also have the other half of my clients are practitioners. They're new, aspiring, or established spiritual practitioners. They're body workers, massage therapists, acupuncturists, naturopathic doctors, Western medical doctors, nurses, physician's assistants. They're in some kind of service, healing, helper, healer role, social workers, therapists, or energy healers. And they're looking for training and spiritual skill development to add tools of shamanism, alchemy, and all of the modalities that I work with to their practice to support their higher service and supporting their clients.
I love that you are training people to support that because in the traditional go to the doctor, get fixed right now, it's just kind of the band-aid. You're not getting to the root of stuff. So I think what you're doing and helping other people do and expanding their practices is going more to the root of why people are sick or suffering. Now, you talked in there about helping heal the body and energy healing. And I'm just curious, what does energy healing look like?
It can look like a lot of different things. There are so many different energy healing modalities. And my primary modalities that I work with are shamanic healing. I've got pages and pages of certifications. I've been on this path for a very long time in different modalities of that. And so sometimes that can look like a very peaceful, nurturing, chakra clearing, balancing, stabilizing. And sometimes in a more intense healing session, like if I'm helping to extract something out of somebody, there's drumming and a lot of noise and crying and vomiting sounds, etc., which ends up being a little dramatic, but it's part of the process of energetic purging and purification to help support extracting something out of somebody. Or another thing that shows up in shamanic healing is soul retrieval. So if somebody has some soul loss or soul fragmentation, either from trauma in this life or inherited trauma from their lineage or past life trauma, then working with retrieving those pieces and reintegrating them into wholeness.
Fascinating. I would just love to hear what are some things that people have to purge?
Yeah. So this purging and releasing, this is something that falls under when we talk about the process of transformation and the cycle of transformation. We have both in shamanism and in alchemy, we have the process of death, purification, and rebirth. Or in shamanism, we look at death and rebirth. And so the process of purging and releasing falls in the death phase of that, where there is some part of ourselves that perhaps was created as a response to trauma in supporting our own survival, or there's some false identity or ideas that we have about ourselves that really aren't in our best interests, or even within the realm of our businesses. If we have aspects of our businesses that just aren't working, or they were created to try to fit in some box of societal conditioning, but they're not really true to our purpose and who we are, then the process of purging is a death process to cleanse and liberate and to fully release both the physical structures of that. We can look at a purging process in our lives, can be anything from ending a relationship, quitting a job or losing a job, even cleaning out your closet, and also the emotional and energetic cleansing and purging of saying goodbye to parts of ourselves that really aren't healthy, or letting go of old ideas about ourselves, or putting to rest perhaps inherited or conditioned beliefs, thought patterns, or aspects of our identity that really just aren't serving us anymore. And when we finally outgrow them, we do need to go through a death process to clear, liberate, and purge them out of our bodies, hearts, minds, and energy.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm still fascinated in the back of my head that you get to make money helping people do this kind of process, right?
It's very humbling, Jenny, and I love it. Honestly, just how I became an entrepreneur. I never actually intended to start a business. I just had people who wanted to pay me money to do the thing that I wanted to do anyway. So in 2009, I had just graduated from university. I was already well into studying shamanism, energy healing, and many different modalities. And I had people coming to me, some who like heard about me through referrals, or my teacher that sent them to me because they were like, oh, Michelle is really great at this. She can help you. And people were asking me for appointments and sessions and asking me for help and offering to pay me. So I was like, sure, I guess you can pay me for that. That sounds cool. And I set up an LLC because my mom told me, oh yeah, you should like set up a business so you can have a place for that money to go. And that's how I entered my journey of entrepreneurship. It just kind of happened that way. But yeah, it all came out of my love and my passion for this kind of work because it's fun for me. I enjoy it. I'm really great at it. And I get to help people and make money doing what I love to do.
And if everybody could figure out a way in their own life to do that. And yes, for some people, when I say the 9 to 5 grind, some people thrive on that. They love that show up at 9, go home at 5, and get to leave it. And that works for some people, but for some people, it doesn't. So if they can find a purpose doing work that they love and get paid to do it and get paid well, I think so many people think that healers and kind of going into, if you're okay with the more woo term, right? Like going off into the field that's kind of not everybody buys into this, but the people that do, and they will pay you for it, right? It's not like you're making peanuts. You're actually getting paid well to do the thing that you love to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a niche specialization for sure. And yes, there are people in the world who have no context or understanding for what I do, but that's okay. They're not my people. Right? I have clients kind of all over the financial spectrum. I have clients who really are not very economically flush, and I have offerings in my work to support people who need help, who really can't pay some of the higher price tag work. I have a lot of free or low price offerings. And then I do have much more intensive work. I developed a 200-hour alchemy training for both practitioners and non-practitioners. So that's a year-long intensive training. And that does have a much higher price tag, but it's a much more intensive training that includes in-person retreats and one-on-one support as well. So again, all over the spectrum, there's something for everybody in my work. It is a priority for me to have my work be accessible to people who need help, no matter where they're at in their own financial thrivingness. And for the people who want the more in-depth support, I have options for them. And then for people who need help that is a little more affordable, I have options for them too.
It's really nice to have that scale there. And let's dip back over into that fun word of alchemy. I've always loved that word. So let's go play in that space here for a bit. What is your favorite part of the alchemy processes that you do?
Oh, that's a great, my favorite part of the process of alchemy. I love that it demystifies the process of transformation. So one thing that I see in people who are looking at their lives, and they might be looking at their jobs saying, as you mentioned, people in the 9 to 5 grind, and maybe they're not happy. Maybe they feel like, oh my gosh, this job is sucking the life out of me. Or they're in a relationship that they're tolerating that might not be the right fit, but it's okay. Or they're in a home that just really doesn't feel great to them. And they're looking around at their lives saying, gosh, I know this isn't the thing, but I'm either intimidated or afraid, or I just don't even know how to do anything different than what I'm doing. And there are so many people, and this is true also in our businesses. Like if you kind of create this groove for yourself, it can feel, for those of us who are entrepreneurs, it can feel very almost like overwhelmingly debilitating to look at, oh my gosh, I want to make this pivot in my business. Like something in my work really isn't making me happy anymore. And it seems like a huge endeavor or pain in the butt to make these changes. And so many people live a life of toleration and putting up with stuff just because they don't even know where to start, or the process of transformation seems overwhelming, intimidating. Oh gosh, I can't do that. Or, oh, if I do that, it's going to mean XYZ. It means I'll lose my friends and people won't understand me. And if I start this business doing the thing that actually makes me really happy, people will think I'm a total weirdo. All of the above. And alchemy is literally the roadmap to transformation. That's what it is. That's its thing. Is it teaches us how transformation works through the three phases that I already mentioned: death, purification, and rebirth, which are divided into the 7 stages of alchemy. And each stage of alchemy is responsible for this very particular aspect of the process of transformation, that when we know how it works, it just makes it so much more approachable. It makes it less intimidating. People feel less overwhelmed. It feels like, okay, if I just know this is how it works. And we see this in the world. Alchemy didn't come from nowhere. It came from how nature behaves. It came from the cycles of change in the world all around us. Like, this is based in universal law. And so for even those of us who are so unique and special, alchemy still applies to you, I promise. You are not so unique and special that universal law does not apply. And so with that, it just makes it okay. If I just know this is what I can expect, I know these are the natural energies that it takes to move through this process of transformation. And again, in that course that I mentioned, the 200-hour training, I teach movement practices, energy practices, meditation techniques, personal development work, consciousness practices, really working on all levels to support moving through this cycle. So then when you're able to identify, okay, this is how transformation works, you look at the 7 stages and you can say, oh, I'm in stage 3 right now. This is where I'm at right now. So if I know that I'm in stage 3, these are the practices that I need to do to help me move to stage 4. These are the action steps that I need to take in my life, my health, my business to help me move on. I need to take care of these things, and then I can focus on this. So it ends up creating, instead of this overwhelm feeling, overwhelm, resistance, fear, intimidation, it creates much more approachable, much more accessible, makes us feel like I don't like to call it control, but we're at least collaborating with these universal forces so that we feel confident and empowered rather than flying by the seat of our pants. I don't know what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. I am just seeing out the corner of my eye here because it's fall time here. So all the trees are beautifully different colors right now. So is it kind of like that? Like the tree itself is going through this process. All these beautiful leaves are going to fall off. Then it's going to frost here and the trees are going to go dormant for a while. Then comes springtime, they're going to bud again and they're going to grow back into these beautiful green leaves. The tree's not questioning the process there. We as humans can watch that process and we know that it repeats on a cycle. So is a human going through this alchemy process, are you telling them, okay, don't worry, your leaves are going to change color, they're going to fall off? Are you walking them through that kind of process of like their inner workings, I guess?
Yeah, Jenny, it's exactly like that. So we can look outside and see the cycles in nature, in the seasons, in just the rising and setting of the sun, the cycle of the day. We know from our observation and from just seeing the cycle over and over and over and over again that in the spring, buds come out, new leaves form, there are flowers, there's fruit. And then in the fall, the leaves turn red and yellow and they drop, and then the tree goes into dormancy. So we know that there are cycles of death and rebirth, expansion and contraction in nature all the time. And the same is true of a seed. If you have a seed, in order for the seed to turn into a tree, it first must go through what looks like complete destruction. It actually needs to break open and the seed needs to die. It needs to completely come apart. And then this vulnerable little shoot comes out that doesn't look anything like the tree that it's going to become. It's this little tiny sprout and the root kind of curls out of there. And then eventually it starts to grow and it's this little baby tree and it gets much taller. So we can see this in nature. And in alchemy, it's really the same process of we know that something new inherently must be preceded by something else ending. But because we live in a society where we're very disconnected from those cycles, we live in the modern Western world where live in houses with electricity. You can turn on the light and turn on the heat. And if you're not going outside every day, we become a little more oblivious to those cycles in our lives. So it can feel all the more distant and all the more intimidating. But if we are connected with those cycles, it makes it less scary. It makes it much more approachable. And then when people are wanting to make those changes, instead of feeling like, gosh, I don't even know where to start, they can enter into that process with more trust, more safety, more confidence, and feeling empowered in that process because they know how it works, or at least they know what to expect. And they know, yeah, it might be a little uncomfortable. Like just like the tree needs to drop all their leaves, the tree isn't questioning that process. The seed needs to break open. I might go through a breaking open. I might go through a shedding. I might lose some things in my life, but it's all in service to being able to go through that rebirth and then grow as a more true version of myself in the next iteration that is rooted in my values, rooted in the core of who I am, rooted in my priorities. And ultimately, that's what we all want, is to be more of who we are.
That is truly who we want, to be more of who we are. And I feel like this segues into one of my favorite questions on the show. What is your advice for someone to truly go out and step into that life that is congruent to them?
I think to not be afraid of loss. I think that is an obstacle that a lot of people face, even when considering entering into this transformational cycle. People are very afraid of what people might think of them. They're afraid of people not understanding. Transformation is generally like not necessarily culturally rewarded. You know, if we start making choices that are potentially seemingly different or unfamiliar to people who are used to us being a certain way in our lives, we can face like, oh, you're acting so different now, or oh, you don't call me anymore, or whatever that might be. So we have social pressure. And of course, there are people in our lives who are very supportive, and friends and loved ones who stand by us and say, yes, I see that you're making changes. I know this might feel hard right now, but I support you, right? We have people who are very supportive. But I think there's a lot of like overcoming our deeply rooted fears. And humans are naturally loss averse. Like we do not like to lose things. And that just makes sense based on our survival. But I think with knowing and trusting and embracing that before rebirth, something has to go, something has to die, and to not fear that. Because in alchemy as a spiritual wisdom tells us that whatever enters through the fires of transformation, we don't know what will be remaining on the other side. But we do know that what survives through the fires of transformation will be true. And anything that is burned away or lost in the fires of transformation wasn't true to begin with, wasn't part of the true self.
That is great. The sticking point in there for me was this society, we aren't really supportive in big changes, right? And so often it's, yes, we can find that little peer group around us that's supportive, but even then sometimes aren't that supportive because they're fearful for the what ifs, right? You don't see the whole part of the transformation. So they're fearful on our behalf for our own safety.
Or even it brings up their own fear and resistance to transformation in their lives. Like I've been through shifts in my life where I've lost friends, like some of my closest people who I never, ever would have imagined would decide to not be in my life. But in making some choices that were very important to me, making choices to make some big shifts in my life that took me in a direction of more health, more opportunity, more happiness, more peace, well-being, it ended up being very confronting to some people who were some of my closest friends. And I actually received some messages that made me very sad, saying essentially, Michelle, the choices you're making are really stressing me out and I need to take some space from our friendship. It was devastating, but ultimately I'm able to look at that with a lot of compassion and say, you know what, for that person, I understand why me doing that was very confronting to them, because I see ways in that person's life. I'm thinking of one friend in particular, I see ways in that person's life where they are not living as the version of themselves, as the true version of themselves. They're not living in the things that make them most happy. And so then me choosing to move in that direction, ultimately, I think this is what happened because I didn't get to have that conversation. Unfortunately, they just stopped being my friends. But I can imagine that me making choices in that direction really reflected to them or made them reflect on ways in which they're not doing that for themselves. And so for us, we, the change makers, we who are here to be more of who we are, we who are here to step boldly into a life that is true and authentic and ultimately inherently sort of revolutionary by virtue of the fact that it is true to our core essence and true to nothing else, that will be confronting to some people. And it will be confronting to anyone who is living a life according to external values or culturally imposed conditioning. So we just need to be internally secure in, you know what, I'm doing this for me, and that's what matters.
Mm-hmm. That it's hard to hear because you don't want to lose those friendships. But if I had a magic wand that I could throw onto this world, I would love for there be a way for me to live my life, you to live your life, the neighbors to live their life without judgment, without putting our own beliefs onto them, and just to have that support for each other, right? It's hard to hear that we can no longer be friends because you're going to go do this thing. And you're not going out and doing something crazy and evil, right? Like something that aligns with you. But I guess if that's not an alignment for them, then they are living their truth by saying, I have to sever this tie with you. And it's freeing you up to go continue on your path and hopefully leaving a new space for somebody else to come in that is aligned with you.
Absolutely. Because when we become more of who we are, then yes, we might lose some people who don't resonate with that. We might lose some friendships or acquaintanceships or whatever, but it makes space in our lives for people to come in who are aligned with that, which ultimately leads to more enriching community and more supportive and healthy relationships and connections.
Mm-hmm. For people who feel aligned with you, Michelle, and want more of your community, where can listeners reach out and find you?
Oh, please do. Yes, you can find me on my website, michellehawk.com. That's hawk like the bird, michellehawk.com. And you can sign up for my list there. I've talked a lot about the cycle of alchemy and the different stages of alchemy. So from my website, you can download a free guide to the 7 stages of alchemy that will help you identify where you are in the cycle of transformation, as well as teach you more about how that cycle works. And each stage includes supportive practices and advice on where people get stuck. So if you're feeling stuck or blocked in that cycle of transformation, or you're looking at your life saying, gosh, I really just don't know where to start, start there. Start with the guide, and this will give you some good action steps to go forward. And then for those who are interested in the 200-hour certification training, you can also find that through my website, michellehawk.com. And please reach out to me. Please do. I really enjoy hearing from people how this episode resonated with you. And I hope this was supportive for all of you out there who are looking to work with transformation in perhaps a different way in your life, in your business. This is honestly the best tool that I have found, the best tool to support people in making big shifts and transformation in their life.
Amazing. I will pop all that info in the show notes for people. And I just want to thank you so much for engaging with me on the show today with this conversation. It's a new one for me, and I am definitely intrigued by it all.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jenny. It was wonderful to speak with you. I'm really happy to share this with your audience. I hope it was helpful.